even know how to start this. Like, I'm not trying to sound dramatic or anything, but I think I've really messed up. The kind of mess up where there's no going back, you know? I wish I could say this was just some dumb story I made up, but it's not. This happened. And if you're reading this, please, for the love of God, stay away from the dark web. Let me backtrack a bit. A couple of months ago, I was going through some, let's call it a rough patch. My girlfriend of 3 years had cheated on me with my best friend. Yeah, classic sob story, right? But it wasn't just that. They didn't even try to hide it. They laughed about it, called me pathetic, like I was some joke to them. And if that wasn't bad enough, they made sure everyone in our friend group knew about it. I was humiliated. My social life? Gone. My self-esteem? Absolutely crushed. I became obsessed with revenge, like I wasn't thinking straight, I wasn't eating, wasn't sleeping. All I could think about was how much I hated them and how I wanted them to feel even a fraction of the pain I was feeling. I know that sounds messed up, but unless you've been in that kind of situation, you don't know how bad it gets. Anyway, that's how I ended up on the dark web. I wasn't looking for anything specific at first, just something. I started clicking around, going down rabbit holes until I found this forum. It was all about curses, hexes, and voodoo stuff. Most of it looked fake, like the kind of stuff you'd see in bad horror movies. But then I saw a post about this guy selling custom-made voodoo dolls. He had all these reviews from people saying it worked, like, really worked. One guy said he used it to get back at his abusive boss, and now the dude can't walk without crutches. Another person claimed they used it on their ex and ended up sending them to the hospital with mysterious internal injuries. At first, I thought it was all bullshit, but the more I read, the more curious I got. Plus, the guy selling them had a whole system. You had to email him with the name of the person you wanted the doll to represent, along with a personal item of theirs. He'd give you an address to mail the item to, and once he bonded it to the doll, he'd send it back to you with instructions. It sounded insane, but I was desperate. I wanted them, my ex and my ex-best friend, to suffer. So I did it. I sent him an email with both their names and asked if he could make 2 dolls. He replied almost immediately, like he was just waiting for me. His response was short and to the point. 2 dolls will cost you $500, payment through Bitcoin. I'll send the address once the payment clears. I hesitated for a moment. $500 was a lot of money for me, but at that point I didn't care. I converted some money into Bitcoin and sent it over. True to his word, he gave me an address to send the personal items to. Here's where it gets creepy. I didn't have anything of theirs anymore. They'd moved all their stuff out of my apartment, and I wasn't exactly on speaking terms with either of them. But then I remembered I still had an old hoodie of my ex's stuffed in the back of my closet. As for my ex-best friend, I had this stupid keychain he left in my car one time. It wasn't much, but I figured it would work. I mailed the stuff to the address he gave me, a P.O. box in some random town I'd never heard of, and waited. A week later, I got a package in the mail. No return address, no markings, nothing. Just a plain brown box. When I opened it, I immediately felt sick. Inside were 2 dolls, each about the size of my hand. They were crude, but unsettlingly detailed. One of them had long strands of hair glued to its head that matched my ex's. The other had this little keychain looped around its neck, just like the one I'd sent. But that wasn't the worst part. The dolls had these eyes, not buttons or painted-on dots like you'd expect, but real, glassy eyes that seemed to follow me no matter how I turned them. There was a note in the box too. It was handwritten in this shaky, almost childlike scrawl. Think of the person. Hold the doll tight. Whatever you do to the doll will happen to them. Use with caution. There's no undoing it.
I was shaking as I read it, felt so surreal. But I was too deep to back out now. I set the dolls on my desk and just stared at them for a long time, trying to decide what to do. My rational side was screaming at me to throw them away, burn them, anything. But then I thought about everything they'd put me through, all the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, the humiliation, the anger. I picked up the doll with the hair first. That's when things got weird. When I touched it, it was warm. Not like room temperature, but warm, like it was alive. My heart was racing and I could feel this connection. I know that sounds crazy, but it was like I could feel her, my ex. I held the doll tighter and suddenly my phone buzzed. It was a text from her. "Stop it," it said. No context, no explanation, just those 2 words. My blood ran cold. There was no way she could have known what I was doing. It had to be a coincidence, right? But the more I held the doll, the more I could feel it, her fear, her pain. It was intoxicating. That night, I decided to test it for real. I grabbed a needle from my sewing kit and slowly pressed it into the doll's arm. Almost immediately, my phone buzzed again. Another text from her. This time it said, "I'm serious, stop." My arm hurt so bad. I think I need to go to the hospital. I dropped the doll like it burned me. Holy shit, it was real. It was actually real. But instead of stopping there like any sane person would have, I picked up the second doll, the one for my ex-best friend. I'm trying to calm down as I write this, but my hands are shaking. I'm still in shock, to be honest. I keep looking over my shoulder, even though I know no one's behind me. I can't help it. After what happened, I don't know how I'm still sane. But here's what went down after I picked up the second doll. I remember feeling this heavy weight in the air when I grabbed the second one, the one for my ex-best friend. The feeling was different from the first one. With my ex, there was rage, but with this doll it was more unsettling. It was like something was wrong, like I wasn't supposed to be holding it. I don't know how to explain it, but I could feel him, like he was right next to me. It was almost suffocating. I almost didn't want to do anything to it. I was scared. But then I remembered what had happened when I hurt my ex with the needle. She texted me. I had to try it with him too, just to see. Just to get the same rush of power I got when I hurt her. I didn't want to feel weak anymore. I wanted control. And in that moment, I thought I had it. I grabbed the keychain that was looped around his doll's neck, just like the one I'd sent him. It was simple, just a little plastic thing, but it had this weight to it. As soon as I held it, I felt this sickening pull in my gut, like something was yanking at me from the other side. My fingers trembled, and I swear the air in my room got colder. The lights flickered, but I didn't stop. I twisted the keychain like I was twisting a knife into his soul. The phone buzzed again. I froze. It was a text from him. "What the hell are you doing? I can't breathe. Something's wrong." My heart started pounding in my chest. I almost dropped the doll. He was freaking out just like she had. The weird thing was, he wasn't the kind of guy to admit when he was scared. He always acted tough, like nothing bothered him. So why the hell was he texting me like that? I didn't know what to do next, so I did what felt natural. I pushed the keychain further into the doll, like I was choking it. The sensation in my stomach grew stronger, and it felt like I was pulling at the fibers of his soul. But instead of feeling satisfied, like I did with my ex, it was like something was fighting back. And then it happened. I don't even know how to explain it. But as soon as I twisted the keychain once more, I heard this loud crack. It was like bones snapping, but it came from the other side of the room. I spun around, expecting to see something, anything, but there was nothing. My stomach dropped. I felt dizzy. I was sweating. Then my phone buzzed again. "What the hell did you just do to me?" That was the message. But it wasn't him. The voice in my head was wrong. It sounded different, distorted, like it was coming from somewhere deep inside of him. It was like I was hearing his voice, but also something else, something dark, something evil. The next few hours were a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about the text. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had just done. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the dolls. Every time I heard a noise, I thought it was him or her or something else coming for me. It got worse the next day. My ex had been quiet for a while after I first started with the doll, but she reached out again. Only this time, it wasn't a text, it was a phone call. I didn't pick up at first. I thought maybe she was just screwing with me. But then the voicemail came through. When I listened to it, I almost threw up. There was nothing at first, just silence. Then I heard her voice, faint, weak, like she was speaking through a tunnel. I can't feel my leg. I don't know what's happening to me. Then the sound of scraping, like someone dragging themselves across the floor, followed by a weird gurgling noise. She was gasping for air. I don't know how else to describe it. It was like she couldn't breathe properly, but not in a normal way. It was more like something was crushing her from the inside out. I rushed to the hospital. I don't even know why. I didn't think I'd actually caused any real damage, but deep down, I felt this pull, like I had to be there. When I got to the ER, I was met by her mum, who was pacing around like a maniac. She looked at me like I was the devil. "What did you do to her?" she screamed at me. "What did you do?" I didn't even know what to say. The doctors were trying to stabilize her. They kept saying her vitals were crashing, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. They kept asking her if she had been exposed to something toxic, or if she had been in an accident. But she kept mumbling the same thing over and over. "It's him. It's all him." I wanted to leave, to run far away, but I couldn't. I had to know if she was going to make it. After a few hours, they came out and told me they'd stabilized her, but they had no idea what had caused the damage to her body. Her limbs were stiff, like she couldn't move them. She had no feeling, no explanation. When I left the hospital, I realized something. I realized that it wasn't just the voodoo doll. It wasn't just about revenge. This thing, whatever it was real. It wasn't just something you play around with. And the worst part, I wasn't done yet, because my ex-best friend had gone completely off the rails too. I didn't know what was going on with him, but I couldn't shake this feeling in my gut. I thought maybe I'd just overdone it with the doll, that it was a coincidence. But I was wrong. I should have stopped. I should have thrown that thing away, but by then it was too late. The dolls, they were connected to something darker than I could ever have imagined. And no matter how much I tried to undo it, it was only going to get worse. I didn't think it could get worse. After what happened to my ex and my best friend, I figured I was done. I thought maybe I'd made my point. I mean, both of them were messed up in ways I couldn't explain. But here's the thing. I wasn't just messing around with some dolls anymore. I was dealing with something way beyond my understanding, something alive.
It started with the dreams. I don't know how to describe them other than they were real. It wasn't like the usual nightmares where things are a little twisted, but you wake up and realize it's all just your brain running wild. No, these were vivid. Too vivid, like I was actually living them. And when I woke up, I felt drained, like I had been doing something physical in my sleep. The first night after the hospital, I dreamed of my ex. She was lying in a hospital bed just like she had been earlier that day, but this time she was awake. Her eyes were wide open, but she wasn't blinking. She couldn't move. She was just staring. The whole room was dark, except for this faint light that seemed to come from nowhere. Her mouth was open, but no sound came out. It was like she was trying to scream, but the air around her was so thick that she couldn't make a sound. And then, the thing that still haunts me, the doll. The voodoo doll of her, the one I'd used to hurt her, was standing at the foot of her bed. But it wasn't just standing there anymore. It was moving. It wasn't walking, not like a person. It was crawling on its little hands, like some kind of twisted insect. And the worst part was that its eyes were following me. It was looking right at me as it crawled closer to her. I tried to scream, but my voice was caught in my throat. I wanted to move, to help her, but I couldn't. I just stood there, watching, as the doll got closer to her face. And that's when it started whispering. It wasn't a voice like a human's. It was more like a static, crackling noise mixed with the sound of someone choking. It whispered her name over and over, and then it whispered mine. "You're next." That was when I woke up. I shot up in bed, gasping for air. My body was drenched in sweat, and my heart was pounding like I'd just run a marathon. I couldn't shake that feeling of dread. It was like something was waiting for me. I was terrified to even look at my phone, but when I did, there was a message from my ex. "It's not over. It's never over. I'm sorry. Please stop." I didn't reply. I didn't know what to say. What could I even say at that point? I had no idea what was happening to her or why the doll was still messing with her. But the next day, I found out. I went to visit her, even though I knew I shouldn't. The hospital had discharged her, but she was staying with her mum. I needed to see her in person to know for sure that what happened wasn't just some coincidence. I drove over to her place, feeling a knot in my stomach the entire way there. When I walked in, her mum looked at me with pure hatred. I couldn't blame her, really. But my ex, she didn't look the same. She was pale, her skin almost grey, like she hadn't seen the sun in weeks. Her eyes were wide, but they weren't the eyes I remembered. It was like she was looking through me, not at me. "What did you do?" she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, like she hadn't spoken in days. "It won't stop. Please, it won't stop. You have to destroy it." She reached for me, grabbing my arm with a strength I didn't think she had left in her. Her nails dug into my skin. I tried to pull away, but she wasn't letting go. "You have to destroy it," she repeated, her voice cracking. "It's inside me. It's inside all of us now." That's when it hit me. Whatever was happening to her wasn't just the doll. It was something more. The curse I'd unleashed was spreading, and I was at the center of it. I wasn't just hurting them anymore. I was dragging everyone around me into this nightmare.
I left her house, feeling like I was suffocating. I didn't know what to do. I thought about burning the dolls, throwing them in the river, anything to get rid of them. But I couldn't stop thinking about that moment in the dream, when the doll had whispered to me. When it had said my name, I couldn't escape it. And that's when things took a turn for the worse. That same night, I had another dream. This time, it wasn't just my ex or my best friend, it was me. I was in the dream, lying in my own bed, but I wasn't alone. The room was dark, just like the others, but this time I could hear something moving, something crawling. I opened my eyes, but it wasn't the same as waking up. It was like I was aware I was dreaming, but I couldn't wake up. I saw the dolls again, both of them sitting on my nightstand. But this time they were different. They were bigger and their eyes were alive. They moved, their heads turning slowly to face me, just like in my first dream. And then I saw the worst thing of all. The dolls were bleeding, not like some toy that had been cut or torn open, but real, dark blood dripping from their eyes, their mouths, their tiny limbs. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. I felt frozen, stuck in place. Then, just like in the other dreams, the dolls crawled toward me. I could feel the air getting thicker, heavier, suffocating me. My chest felt tight, like someone was sitting on it. I wanted to move, to fight back, but I couldn't. It was like my body wasn't my own anymore. I felt something cold press against my arm, and I looked down. The doll with my ex's hair was crawling up my arm, its tiny fingers digging into my skin. And then I heard the whisper again. Only this time, it wasn't just the doll speaking, it was everyone. "You're next, you're next, you're next." I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. My entire body was shaking. I looked at my arm where the doll had been. There were marks, deep indentations, like something had actually clawed me. But I knew it wasn't real. It couldn't be real. Or could it? I don't know what's real anymore. I'm scared to close my eyes. I'm scared to even think about the dolls. But the worst part is, I know it's only going to get worse. I can feel it. I've already lost my ex and my best friend. I've lost my mind. And soon, I'll lose everything else. I didn't think I could go on like this. The nightmares were getting worse. The dolls kept calling to me in a way that felt more like a command than just a bad dream. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Every time I thought about them, I felt this burning sensation crawling under my skin. I had to do something. I thought maybe I could destroy them, burn them, bury them, break them, anything to make it stop. But I didn't know how far it had gone, how deep it had dug into me. So I decided to burn them. It was late, about 2 a.m., when the world felt dead quiet. I thought maybe that silence meant something, like the calm before the storm. My hands were shaking as I grabbed both dolls from the drawer. I didn't even hesitate. I just went straight to the kitchen and grabbed the lighter fluid. I had made up my mind. The moment I lit the match, it would all be over. I tossed both dolls into the metal sink and doused them with the lighter fluid. The smell hit me like a punch to the gut, sharp, acrid, and sickening. But there was something else too, something off. The dolls, they almost seemed to be waiting, as if they knew what I was about to do. I lit the match. The flames caught almost immediately, licking the sides of the dolls, consuming them in seconds. But then something I never expected happened. The dolls didn't burn like normal toys. They didn't shrivel up, melt, or crack. They screamed.
I know it sounds insane, but I heard them, both of them screaming. The sound wasn't human, but it wasn't exactly animal either. It was like a horrible mix of a person in agony and a guttural growl that sent chills down my spine. The flames didn't seem to hurt them. They just burned with a dark, sickly energy, like they were feeding off the fire instead of being consumed by it.
The air in the room grew thick and heavy, and I had to step back because it felt like I was suffocating. I could barely breathe, like the smoke from the fire was crawling down my throat. And that's when I heard it. From the flames, from the burning dolls, there was this voice. A whisper. Low but clear, like it was coming from right next to my ear. It was a woman's voice, familiar but twisted. "You're making it worse." I froze. I didn't know who it was at first, but when I looked at the dolls again, the eyes, they were staring at me. And not in the way they had before, like creepy little toys with dead eyes. Number this time, they were alive. I could feel the hatred in them. I could feel it. The dolls weren't just toys anymore, they were vessels. Containers for something much darker than I had realized. Something I had let in. I couldn't look away, couldn't move. The heat from the fire was getting unbearable, but I was paralyzed. It was like the dolls had a hold on me. The whispers got louder, more frantic. "You're next! You're next! You're next!" And then, bam! I heard a loud crack, followed by a violent force pushing me back. I flew across the room, landing hard against the kitchen counter. My head hit the edge of the counter, and for a second I thought I was going to pass out. But I didn't. I was alive, and in that moment, I realized something. The fire wasn't stopping it. The dolls weren't burning. They weren't going anywhere. I crawled to my feet, shaking, disoriented. I looked back at the sink. The dolls were still there, half burnt but strangely whole. The flames were still there, licking at the air like they were alive, twisting around the dolls' bodies as if they were feeding on them. The whole room felt like it was closing in on me. I had to get out of there, but as I reached for the door, I heard something. Movement. But not in the kitchen. It was coming from behind me, from the hallway that led to my bedroom. I turned around, my heart pounding, and that's when I saw it. A figure, tall, dressed in black, standing in the doorway. I couldn't see their face at first, but I could feel them staring at me. I was paralyzed again, like the world had gone silent, except for the sound of my pulse in my ears. Then the figure stepped forward, revealing a man's face, but not like any face I had ever seen. His skin was grey, almost decayed, his eyes sunken deep into his skull. His mouth was stretched into this grotesque grin, and his teeth, God, his teeth were like sharp needles. His whole body was stiff, like he was trying to force himself into my world from somewhere else. And when he spoke, it wasn't a voice, it was more like a command, something deep and primal. You've opened the door, you've unleashed the curse, now you belong to it. His words hit me like a wave of cold water. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I was stuck there, staring at this thing, this creature that had come out of nowhere. It was like the curse had finally caught up with me, and now it was here to take its due. I felt the ground beneath me shift, and before I knew it, I was on my knees. The figure was getting closer. His hand reached out, and it felt like time slowed down. Then bam! A loud crash. I jerked up, my heart in my throat, and looked back to the kitchen. The dolls, they had stopped screaming, but they were gone. The fire was out, and in their place. There was nothing but black smoke, swirling and twisting into the air, as if it was pulling the very air out of the room. And in that smoke, I saw something. A face. It was my own, but it wasn't me. It was someone else, someone wearing my skin. I don't know how long I stayed there, staring at the figure, at the smoke, at my reflection. All I know is that when I finally looked away, the man, the thing in the doorway, was gone. But I knew one thing for sure, it wasn't over, it was just beginning. I didn't know how much time passed, hours, days. It didn't matter. My mind was unraveling. That thing, the figure, the creature was still with me. Every shadow in the corner of my room felt like it was watching me. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt its presence, crawling into my mind, whispering that I was its now. But something had changed. I could feel it in my bones. I couldn't explain it, but I knew the curse had marked me. I thought about the voodoo doll and what had happened with my ex and my best friend. I thought about the way the dolls had come to life, about the way they had hissed my name like they had ownership over me. That night, when I was on the floor staring at the creature, I knew that I couldn't run anymore. It was over. I had crossed the line, and now there was no going back. I tried to leave. I packed a bag, thinking maybe I could get away, start fresh, but every step I took toward the door felt like I was walking deeper into some kind of trap. I opened the front door, and that's when I heard it, the whisper. It was louder this time, clearer. "You can't leave, you're not going anywhere." I spun around, expecting to see something in the doorway, but nothing was there. Only the dark, empty space that felt like it was closing in on me. I slammed the door shut and locked it. The walls felt like they were breathing, like they were moving closer and closer. The walls were alive, pulsing with that sick energy that had started back when I first found the doll. I tried to shake it off, but it was there, clinging to my skin like oil, sinking into my mind, making my heart race. I looked down at my hands and I saw something that made my stomach drop. It wasn't blood, but it was dark, sticky, and it was dripping. I ran to the bathroom, turning on the light, desperate to wash it off. But when I looked at my reflection, I froze. It wasn't me. At least, it didn't look like me. My face was pale, drained of color. My eyes were sunken like I hadn't slept in days. But the worst part, there were marks. Scorched, black veins crawling up my neck, down my arms, twisting their way into my skin like they were a part of me. Like I had become whatever this was. I screamed. I don't even remember how long I screamed. All I knew was that I needed to get away from the mirror, away from the reflection that wasn't mine anymore. But when I turned around, there it was again, the figure standing in the doorway. It wasn't just standing anymore, it was smiling. That grin stretched wide, too wide, like it was trying to break its face. It tilted its head as if it was amused by my panic. You belong to it now. I wanted to run, to scream, to do anything but stand there and stare at it. But I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. All I could do was watch as it slowly raised its hand, its rotting hand, and pointed at me. And then I felt it. At first, it was just a sensation like a heavy weight pressing down on my chest. Then it turned to pain. Deep, stabbing pain, like needles digging into my skin from the inside out. I gasped, but no air would come. I could feel the curse crawling inside me, twisting my insides, eating away at me. I tried to fight it. I tried to move, to scream, but it was like I had no control over my body anymore. The thing in front of me grinned wider, its smile now a grotesque rictus, stretching impossibly far. I could hear its voice again, low, guttural, like it was coming from somewhere deep below the earth. You should have never played with things you don't understand. I collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. My body was shaking uncontrollably, my heart racing, like I was being torn apart from the inside. The curse was spreading, taking over every inch of me. I could feel it now. It was inside me. It had taken me, and there was nothing I could do about it. And then I heard something. It was faint at first, just a whisper. But then it grew louder. It was the sound of screaming. My ex's voice, my best friend's voice. Their screams echoed through my head, overlapping with the whispers of the doll, with the voice of the creature. It's too late, they said. You're already gone. I thought I might pass out, but I didn't. I stayed awake through it all, feeling my body change, feeling the curse consume me. I couldn't tell if I was hallucinating or if this was really happening, but I swear I saw the dolls again, the ones I had burned. They were standing in the corner of the room, staring at me with those dead eyes. I felt my pulse quicken as the pain intensified, but that was when it hit me. I didn't have time left. The curse wasn't just hurting me anymore. It was taking everything. It was going to destroy me. But more than that, it was going to spread. I knew I had to stop it. I had to end it before it consumed me completely. So I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed the nearest object, a knife from the kitchen, and plunged it into my arm, trying to cut out the mark, to stop whatever was growing inside of me. But the moment the blade touched my skin, it felt wrong. The pain doubled, and I heard that voice again, louder than ever, mocking me. You can't escape. You can't undo what you've done. The knife dropped from my hand and I collapsed on the floor, blood dripping from my arm. The room was spinning, and I could feel myself losing control. The world was fading away. And in its place I could see the darkness, the curse taking its hold on me completely. I was gone. I don't know who's reading this now, or if anyone will ever read it at all. But if you find this, if you come across this story, do not ever play with the things you don't understand. Do not go near the dark web. Do not mess with things you can't control. The voodoo doll, the curse, the thing that followed me, it's still out there. It's still waiting. It's still hungry. And now it's looking for its next victim. You're next.